When we're just using paper and trace and we can erase with them and lay things on top and just say, it's not precious. Let's make this quick and dirty from the jump. That alone has made huge strides in how quickly we can get through those early conceptual phases and how quickly we can get client feedback and sign off because it's not precious.
So today we're chatting with two firms in Texas who work together, Point B Design Group and A-1 Engineering, about project collaboration and business strategy. So how should architects and engineers work together? Joining us today is architect turned CEO of Monograph, Robert Ewan. 6 years ago, Robert started Monograph to make project management and business easier for architects and engineers. Over 12,000 architects and engineers use Monograph to work smarter and faster. So I'm going to kick things off with, how did you all start working together?
I was trying to remember that. We've been working together now for a handful of years, and we've done probably 6 or 7 projects together so far, and we have another 4 in the bucket right now. Do you remember how we met?
It was a small residential project. I do remember. I think you reached out with some plans, and honestly, I think your office and our office just automatically clicked from day one. And it was actually, I can't even pinpoint when exactly we started working because I feel like I've always worked with you, but I know it was a residential project. And I remember at the time we had Haid. And no, but it's been some time. It's been at least 3 to 4 years that we worked together.
You meet really great partners when it's just so natural. You don't even remember the exact event. It's just you almost are designed to work together from the very beginning. Um, I'm curious, like you mentioned the first project probably was a residential project, but generally what kind of projects do you work on today? Are they still the same? Like are they residential work? Are they commercial work? I think the audience would love to know a little bit more.
It's a mixed bag. It's residential, it's commercial, it's sort of everything in between. A1 is our go-to just because we have that relationship and we can trust them with guiding us in the right direction, regardless of what project type it is. It's just, if you zoom out, it's just a puzzle that we need to solve together.
I think to add to that, one of the key elements to my relationship with Maggie is recognizing my role and responsibility to her, right? I'm not there to essentially change her design or influence her design. You know, me as a structural engineer, I'm a subject matter technical expert. My job, my sole job is to take care of the building and take care of the public. But I've recognized that like Maggie wants to design this building to create the space. Like me as an engineer, I have to be empathetic to that, right? And I think that's where Maggie and I really were able to just collaborate and it worked out because we automatically knew and respected our roles and responsibilities. And so, you know, I think that's what really makes our relationship work out is just our ability to respect each other's collaborative input and resistance at times because you know, we're not always perfect and the conversations, you know, they evolve. But that's what makes our relationship great is us being able to understand each other.
This has really armed us with the knowledge of how to hedge against some of these structural challenges. So he's come into our office and given us rules of thumb. He knows some of our kind of standard design ideas that we bake in naturally and how to design those so that when it does get handed off to him, it's a more streamlined process. So we're not designing in the clouds, we're designing in grounded realities that he's prepared us for. And then when it goes to him, there's a collaboration of what's the intention, what's important, what can give, where are our tolerances. And then we work together on what's the right solution for the project, for the design, the budget, the location. We're working on one together right now that's on the river in Wimberley, and it's in a flood zone right now. Especially, we're incredibly sensitive to that and how powerful water is. And so we've worked really closely together with what is the right structural system to meet budget, but also safety.
Yeah. So I would add this is that Maggie brought up a fantastic point about this collaborative effort as it relates to business, right? Because Maggie and I, as principal engineers and principal architects, we're ultimately responsible for everything that happens, good or bad. And so from a business perspective and also from a design perspective, it's a lot easier if I communicate with her team, what should I expect from you so that I can streamline and get something back to you quicker, right? And so it's kind of like that selfish motive where I want to be able to keep my promise to Maggie so that Maggie keep her promise to her client. And so to be able to do that, we have to be able to exchange whatever we're exchanging, whether we're exchanging documents. We have to figure out a way to do that. And what I found has been really successful with Maggie is her being inviting to me, being able to tell her in her office, this is what you should at least do on a building so that we can keep everything about as typical as possible. And then we just customize those special areas that we certainly need to customize. And having that confidence between my office and her office has really allowed us to not communicate as much, knowing that we already know where we're going.
Because you recognize that you have multiple projects, and as subject matter experts, you need to enable the architects to be thinking about how you're going to receive things. You have the projects together, but then you have this kind of meta project between firms where you're investing in each other. What are the patterns by which you will structure out your projects together? Because you're doing this other firm to firm relationship, Moises, I'm curious, do you structure that across all your architects? For other engineers who want to do something like this and they want to operationalize it, how would they go about it?
Yeah, it's super hard. You know, for an engineer, it's really difficult. For me personally, let me say this. For me personally, unfortunately, I'm not able to provide the same degree of attention to, say, every project in the same manner, right? And so when we sit here and we try to standardize our operation, even though we have standard processes that we treat all of our clients through, with architects, it's a little different because engineers, we have contractor as clients, we have regular homeowners as well as clients. And so we have a variety of clients, but with architectural projects, we have to treat these a little differently because we are working in someone's creative environment, as opposed to I'm just solving a contractor's problem by fixing a foundation or fixing a driveway. So there are two different types of mindsets. And I think as an engineer, what I'm finding is really helpful to my engineers is my ability to switch over into their mindset so that I can work with them, right? Because architects already have a vision and they already have a direction of what they want to create. Well, me as an engineer, I don't want to go through a wrench and I got to understand what that vision is so I can try to create that environment for her, right? So to answer your question, every architect has a different degree of creativity and involvement in their project. And so we kind of tailor it to how the architect wants to utilize it and emphasizes on their project.
We have our framework of our phase, pre-design through CA, but how do we operate within that strategically so that we can be as effective and efficient as possible? And the linear methodology that is, I am going to design, then I'm going to document, and then I'm going to send backgrounds, and then I'm going to get engineering back, and then we're going to look at it. We're going to coordinate it, and then we're going to flag anything. To me, that linear process is so rigid and it's so long that how can we kind of pick pieces apart to start to stack and to make that process a little bit more efficient and effective? Because at the end of the day, time is money, and you want to capitalize on client energy as much as possible. And the longer that process runs, the more energy depleting they get. And then it becomes more energy on your end to keep them excited and keep them going. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. So how can we keep client energy, keep the project going? So with a lot of our engineers, we'll try and front load that coordination effort into like an SD or a DD phase. But when we work with Moises and crew, this is why he's our go-to, is we have established some rules to operate within between the two of us, with him educating us so that we're armed with that knowledge from the jump. So we can be designing in the beginning with him in mind and what we've learned from him with these rules of thumb and basic understanding of structure and where we need the realities to live as far as duct runs, structural, where we can support, where we can cantilever, where we can push it a little bit further. So then we're not waiting until we have backgrounds to send off. We're getting Moises and crew engaged when we have a concept together that we've already developed with these rules of thumb in mind. We're working together on what flags do you see? What could be a road bump? How can we hedge against that? Then we continue working. And then when we send backgrounds, it's a much easier collaborative back and forth that we're not having to coordinate and redline and send back. And then they do it and then they send back and then we coordinate and redline and send back. And it's this really clunky, long process. We're taking that and pulling it apart and making it happen on the front end. So that's how we operate, and that's sort of across the board how we operate with clients, with contractors, with engineers. All of our billing is very transparent, so it's itemized on our invoices as an expense that is passed along to client, that's laid out in the contract. So everything, there's a through line to everything. So what do you find as far as what's the difference in processing that a lot of people are asking?
Even just on the billing side, some folks will take on fixed fees and they're not transparent at all about the sub-consultants rolling up to them. If you're doing it transparently, you want to show that itemized out at SD is this. Here's where we are on billing progress. So the more transparent you get, the more aligned you have to be. That means you have to be aligned on some of the things that used to just be like, oh, you do it the way you do it, I do it the way I do it. When it becomes more clear, your engineer has to be billing their SD phase to your SD phase so that you can fold it in and not confuse the client.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest challenges that I see on the engineering side, right? Because I get hired by architects, right? And so what I'm seeing on the engineering side is it's easy to work with Maggie because she's a lot more accommodating to how we communicate, right? I find I get hired by a variety of architects. And I can tell you that, the truth of the matter is I don't have a perfect relationship with all of my architects, right? Because some it's just harder to communicate with. And be it personality, be it its systems, be it its software, be it its pace of project, right? And so it's, to say that, that every engineer, and I'm going to advocate for my engineers, every engineer should be treated the same. I would say no. When I praise Maggie and any architect, they use a variety of engineers because, how you work with your engineer is extremely important. Can you effectively communicate with the person who's going to put the bones inside of the building to hold it up, right? And so that communication and that understanding and that confidence, it only comes from the human aspect of being able to look at someone and say, forgive me for not getting back to you, but I understand what you're doing, right? And picking up from those points. What I find is some architects are really very, very, very unforgiving on almost anything. And that unforgiveness really crushes the creative structure when you're trying to incorporate your consultant. So I would advocate to architects and anyone, even for engineers hiring other engineers, let's understand that as you're collaborating with your architects and your engineers, let's be mindful that we are dealing with humans, right? And there's that big human element that we have to incorporate that we do fall behind. Everybody falls behind. And so I think that these softwares like Monograph and some of these other applications, at the end of the day, is we're certainly trying to live a less stressful life, but trying to complete this project. I think when I was asking Maggie how she came up with the name of her firm, she said that it was always the objective to get your project from point A to point B. And that's brilliant because literally it's that simple as get the project moving and get it completed.
It's like, what's the point of all this? To build it. Let's get there. Let's get there smartly and not burn resources and time and energy. And, at the end of the day, we have cool jobs. We get to design stuff that we get to see in real life We get to see people interact with it, and we're not saving lives. Like, we have a cool job. Let's just do it.
Maggie,
Don't overthink it. Just get it done.
which project are you most proud of, Maggie?
That's a great question. The project that we had on the homes tour last year, probably one of my most proud projects because it was a great example and practice of collaboration with client and client trusting and us trusting client and team. And it was one of my earlier ones. I think the other one that I'm really proud of is the one that we're working on together, Moises and Wimberley, the river project, because it carries so much weight for the family, for the town. When it's built, it will be an example of resilience. So I'd say those two.
I would agree. It's projects like that Wimberley project that has a real human connection. It's not just a structure. I think what people forget is buildings live also, right? And they give back to us a lot more than we give them. And for this Wimberley project, we're literally suspending the building in hopes that when the flood comes again, we're literally just going to be over the floods, right? And so it's a collaboration between drainage engineers and architects and structural engineers and contractors on board, property owners on board. And these discussions, they're emotional. It's not just looking at a beam or concrete. I mean, it's become an emotional construction meeting or design meeting that we have because it's that much at stake. And that's what makes these projects super cool. When you look at that column, I know why that column is there because the homeowner didn't want the column over here.
Yeah.
There's always a story behind it. I think that's what we chuckle in our heads, right?
Yeah.
I love hearing both of you go at it. It's like we were at a bar and we're just having a really, really good time. Maggie, I think the entire point of it is to get from point A to point B. But what I'm hearing a lot in this dialogue is actually how you get to point B really matters. The communication, the relationship, things, regardless if you're using a tool or if it's AI this or AI that, like there's some things that are still core to how we exist as human beings and how we occupy space that really, really matters, and how we work with each other really, really matters. So build a really good relationship, start it early, get everyone on board, be transparent in how we all work. Like these things matter as we go from point A to point B. Which I didn't know that that's how you got the name, and now I'm so excited.
It's overly simplified, and I didn't want a name that had my name on the door because it's bigger than me. It's my team, our consultants who we work with. How do we all together get this done? Because a building does not exist with me alone. It is dependent on contractor, client, engineer, all of these pieces coming together to make it happen.
Um, Most of the people who are watching us now don't know, but we were talking about Mies a little bit earlier before the webinar started. So it reminds me that less is more. And you're also reminding me that like sometimes the things that are the most simplest things are actually the hardest things to accomplish. And that's usually true in most things in life. If you want to create something that's really, really simple, really, really easy, those are the hardest projects to pull off. It's incredibly difficult to pull off easy and simple.
Yeah.
I would add,
There's nothing to hide behind. Sorry, go ahead, Moises.
I was going to mention that, in the military, I had this great commander who once told me that if you want to make anything more efficient, don't add a step, get rid of a step. But it was so hard to get rid of stuff. So anytime I look at my processes or anytime I have an issue on a project and I do that evaluation of the project, why did this project go wrong or why did I lose this client, right? I always look at what steps could I have taken to prevent that? Maybe one of my steps was a part of the reason, right? And so I look at that efficiency, and to Maggie's point about plan B, sometimes I look at how do we get rid of a step to become, maybe I add a step out of my own anxieties, out of my own precautions, when really I should look at it as, is that step necessary? And maybe I'm being redundant in some areas, right? And I think that's what, trying to look at our processes from that perspective, I think makes us more efficient. And hence why we advocate to Maggie and her office as to let's make sure that there's a collaborative effort on how we're going to understand each other so that we can not only communicate through our applications and our plans, but just understand each other. And that's how we get the project from point A to point B.
I noticed that there's usually a correlation where if there's a lot of steps, there's usually very low trust. And usually you have a lot of trust and you have way less steps because like it's the steps are usually there because there's inherently not enough trust. So like you got to put in checkpoints to ensure things are doing well. But like if you have trust there, then you actually need less checkpoints. So less steps are required.
Really good point.
Usually I think about that a lot here at Monograph. As we're growing, it's like, okay, how many steps do we have? How many different checkpoints we have? And the more I try to reduce things means the more trust I have to build. And I'm really self-aware when I find it difficult to remove steps. That usually means one, I don't start with the process. I start with like, okay, there must be a gap in trust somewhere, and like we should fix that first. Because then the process becomes easy, way easier. Building trust and establishing trust is actually extraordinarily hard.
And I think that even goes for our clients, right? So when you really look at how, when you get selected for any project, it's really a blessing, right? Because the competition is out there, right? I mean, I know Maggie has an entire state of Texas to choose engineers from, right? And so be able to be chosen, that one project, regardless of the contract amount, to just be able to be chosen, that's because I trust you with the project, right? And that's point A. Like, I at least trust you. Like, you at least need to give it back to me.
And I think that trust that comes from the relationship too, where we're investing in each other to build that trust. And I really, going back to that whole relational, humanistic element of this, I think that at the end of the day, the product is the building. But like you said, that building gives so much back to us that if the process is fraught with fighting and infighting or no trust or a long process or overbilling or over budget, then this building is growing with this really negative energy in it. And I know it sounds woo-woo, but I'll lean into the woo-woo that if the process is crummy, that building is going to carry that through its life cycle. And that client is going to move through that building with that undercurrent of negative energy. Where if we are building that trust from the jump, and that is not just with the client, but with our team, and then we're showing the client this that we've built together, then they're on board to trust. Everybody's in this nest of communication and transparency. And that's the foundation of what we're building this process and project from. Then the outcome, it might look the exact same, but it will have a completely different life and feeling and energy at the end.
I love that we're spending so much time on energy, the emotions, and the people. I would love to see if we can get a little bit deeper. Like, how do we think about time relative to these topics? How much time? How do we invest that time? We're on a Zoom now, and like technology have made managing some of those cadence easier. Uh, I'm curious, like, how else do you think about managing time, generally speaking, for your business, relative back to like a project? How do you think about when it starts, the cadences that you have to hold to ensure that trust continues to be there? We'd love to know how you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, we have sort of a framework of how long things should take as sort of our baseline to work from. But I really challenge myself and my team to be attuned to client because client is going to tell us what they're going to need, but they're not going to tell us with words. They're not going to say, I need this cadence. I need this type of communication. They're going to tell us with their actions, with their body language, with how they're communicating to us. So we need to be very open and aware and create capacity for ourselves to see that so that we can react and capitalize on that. And we're operating within our framework, but we might push things forward or pull things out a little bit based on what our client is showing us so that we can capitalize on what they're telling us they need. And then that right sizes the cadence for the project, but then it also builds that trust with the client that they're feeling really heard and seen.
Yeah, I would add that if someone can just solve time management everything will just work out. Everything works, right? Because that means I have time for everything. And I have time to go home to my family, right? And so, boy, it's hard. I don't know how architects do it, but I find it really challenging where if, I want to interact as much as I can with my clients, whether that's the owner, a contractor, architect, right? But I need a lot of time. I need to be able to sit here in perfect quietness and just work, right? And I think in a time management, we need that block of time to just work. And so I know in my office, I've tried to set up a rule where don't put me on a call at 10 o'clock in the morning. You're killing my day. I either do it first thing in the morning or later in the afternoon. So I've really tried to incorporate some kind of rules where I want to make myself accessible to my clients, but I have to recognize where I can't make myself too accessible because I'll never be able to get any work done. So I think that's, as a professional, whether an architectural firm or a law firm or an engineering firm, you still want to make yourself available for your business, but then you still got to get your business done. Mm-hmm. So I know in my own practice, I've really tried to regulate myself. And that at times puts friction in communication because I don't make myself as available. And that's the part, me as a professional, I just got to continue to figure out how to manage that. And I think that having these discussions certainly makes me aware of it and makes me really rethink, can I do a better job of making myself more accessible? So I know Maggie has experienced me sometimes not being accessible. So I like to really talk about that. Like, what can I do, Maggie, to make myself more accessible to you? How about that?
I mean, you have always, it goes back to that human piece, right? Like we all make mistakes. We're all just trying to do the best we can. And I think it's just giving each other some grace and understanding and space where we're not going to yell fire, but if I yell fire, you respond.
Yes.
And so it's going back to that mutual respect, mutual trust of, I trust that you're doing everything that you said you're going to do. But if something pops up and I need it now or I need a response, you are available.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah.
But that comes with the team behind us, right? Yeah. Because I think what we miss here is that I have 15 people behind me, as you saw, and I apologize for being rude. Somebody walked in to bring me lunch because sometimes I just cannot eat unless my team feeds me, right? Because we try to make ourselves fully available to it. So I think we forget that there is a whole group of people behind us that make us available and really make our business shine. I think we forget to thank them a lot of the times. And so if a team is watching, thank you for really helping us.
Amen.
Your effort is really important.
Yes, I could not agree more, because that's exactly what gives us the capacity and space to do things like this, or to do bigger business initiatives or work on the business, that we're not beholden to drawing or drafting because we have that whole team behind us. And I'm pointing here because they are literally behind me in that studio. And there's that built-in trust there too, where I trust that they are going to design with our values and integrity in mind of what we deliver. When I go and sell a client and I say, this is how we operate, this is what we deliver, I know that they will deliver on that. I don't have to micromanage, I don't have to question. And so then that gives me space and time. So yeah, it's trust, it's relationships across the board within your own team, with your consultants, with your client. And if all that falls into place, the end product that is architecture will be beautiful.
I agree.
You've got your team, you've got your tools. Let's hear more about what's inside of both those groups. How have you thought about the structure of your team, the folks who are there, the specialists? And then what tools are you using? Let's also include maybe design tools too, but how are you thinking about all this management, all this work to do?
Maggie, you want to go at it?
Sure. So our tools, we use Monograph, and Monograph has been a great tool to track time, budgets, invoicing, big picture finances, so that I can look at the overall health of the business. When do I need to find work? When do I need to pull back? When do I need to hire somebody? And it's helping me identify those things because, yes, we're architects, and yes, we're practicing that sculpture and design, but it's a business. The product is the architecture, but if we don't have the business health, then we're not going to be able to architect. So really, that is one tool that I use every day to feed and water the organism that is the business. My team uses ArchiCAD, which is Revit BIM software. So we can transfer models back and forth with Moises and his crew to check things and look at how things are coming together. We use a lot of paper and trace. And I know it's old school, but again, it builds client trust, especially when you use it in the beginning, because there's this mindset that happens that if something's already in the computer, if it's rendered, if it's too done or precious, they have a harder time giving feedback or changing or tweaking because there's, oh, it's going to take a long time or it's going to be expensive. But when we're just using paper and trace and we can erase with them and lay things on top and just say, it's not precious. Let's make this quick and dirty from the jump. That alone, when we shifted to that earlier on, has made huge strides in how quickly we can get through those early conceptual phases and how quickly we can get client feedback and sign off because it's not precious. We can just push and pull and move around and then inputting it into the 3D software. We have been using Chrome AI, which is an AI rendering tool, and that's been really helpful to get super quick conceptual visuals of a model that looks pretty stark in the software, but can come to life really quickly and cheaply without burning resources so that clients can start to visualize even more. So our tools are these layers of development so that we're not going too far too fast, but that we're keeping a really good handle on it. And then we have internal policies and procedures within this structure and framework to identify trajectory of any issues or problems before they're a problem or an issue. So for us, it's a combination of software and internal tools and policies and procedures to balance the two, to keep this framework in place and to keep running really effectively and efficiently so that we're not burning time and resources and we're keeping that client trust and client energy and momentum.
Yeah, I would add that. I know on my side, trying to run a production company, let's get plans out, right? Regardless of what those plans are. One of the biggest challenges that I've had, it hasn't necessarily been technology because I've started incorporating 3D laser scanners. I'm a small firm and I've had a 3D laser scanner for almost 8-9 years. We run Tekla for steel designs. We run Revit. So we've incorporated upfront 3D modeling, not because we're just trying to be cool, but because I want to be able to communicate with Maggie. I know what she's using. And I know that if I'm going to work on an existing building, yes, everyone can go out there and take measures. But if I made the investment into a 3D laser scanner, why not use it? I'm not going to charge Maggie extra for it because it's going to reduce the amount of errors that we make later on. A big part of the work that I do is forensic work. So I'm in between a deposition today where I'm testifying, but engineers, a lot of times we get asked to repair stuff. So we get exposed to what happens on the bad end, right? When construction goes wrong. And so a lot of times we want to incorporate those into our designs. So one of the things that I've done, because I'm so careful about the designs that I'm having to push out, how do I push out a design, but being mindful of trying to get this design out efficiently without wasting a bunch of resources? So to Maggie's point, I've created policies and procedures, templates and standards that if we can at least get this, we've at least started the building off right. And it's that effective communication with your team and managing expectations also with your team. So what I've learned is that instead of hiring a degree, I hire a mindset. And so if I can get the right employee with the right mindset, I can do almost anything. Because if I can just teach you how to hit that button, okay, good, we're on step one, right? And so we really try to cultivate our team to be, I don't want to say decision makers, but certainly make them a part of the actual process, regardless whether they're a young intern fresh out of college or a degreed engineer. We still give them technically the same degree of responsibilities, just under different supervisions, but we really make an investment to try to make sure that our folks are up to date with all the software. That regardless of who I throw a piece of paper at, they're able to develop that into something that follows the company template. And I think us as leaders, that's the part that makes it difficult for us, that we need to make sure we communicate that expectation that Maggie is holding me to, and how do I develop that, bring that out of my team, I think is our biggest challenge that we have as owners and proprietors.
So exciting to hear both of you share your, we'll call it like tool stack for you to run your business, and then all the policies and procedures that you have to write to make sure that things run efficiently and on time. I'm curious, like, as you start to think about procedures and policies and how to work with each other, we've heard a lot of great things on how both of you work together. I'm curious if you'd be willing to share things where you can use a little bit more improvement. We're all work in progress. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. And I'm curious, as the world changes, like our policies and procedures should change. What gaps have you seen recently that like, oh, like we should fix that. In terms of like how we engage with each other as architects and engineers.
I mean, I think that for myself, it's that the capacity and the balance to make sure that I am leading by example of work-life balance, so that I'm not expecting my team to not have that work-life balance, ensuring that I'm protecting time throughout the day and not overscheduling so that I'm available to them and Moises. For me, a policy that I've put in place and that I keep breaking myself is how many meetings I have per day. And it's holding myself accountable, because at the end of the day, I have to lead by example. And if I'm not doing it, how can I hold anybody else accountable? So it kind of starts and stops with me, and following that and making sure that I'm pacing my own week, my own month, my own year well and sustainably, so that I have time for them. I have time for projects and clients and business development and all the things. I would say, the constant project of policy is the process, is how do we develop a process that is tried and true and a well-oiled machine, but allows for flexibility, because every project is unique and different and requires a different level of design or documentation or cadence. How do we develop a process that is both rigid and flexible at the same time? And to date, I mean, the relationship between us and A1 has been very organic, and sort of these unspoken rules and relationship. But I don't know, maybe we write something, Moises. Maybe we say, when we engage with each other, this is what it looks like.
Yeah, I think you brought up two good points. One, accountability, right? And I think, like you, I hold myself accountable for everything. And sometimes I have to recognize that if my staff makes a mistake, it's not necessarily their fault. It's my fault, right? And so I have to look at, really, am I holding myself accountable, my management, for my policies and procedures, where I develop a policies and procedure that maybe is no longer needed. But I think, certainly trying to hold myself accountable to myself and to you, I think is where the responsibility is. I can't just let that project go. And even if I'm falling behind, it's recognizing that I need to get involved. Like you mentioned, when it's hot, I need you right now, and I'm going to drop whatever I'm doing, right? I don't have that choice, because I want to make sure that I maintain that relationship and respect with you. So I think, Robert, going back to at the very beginning, how do you establish a relationship? I think that what I've learned and gathered through this discussion is it's people, right? It's, at the end of the day, the one thing they never teach us in engineering school is how to have a relationship with someone, right? And we're using these mediums. I think this is what's really impressive, is that when I started my company in 2011, I had a printer in my car, and I was driving around trying to figure out where I was going to get a client. And now I'm on Zoom, right? And so technology alone has really added the benefit of us being able to be responsible, be connected, make ourselves available. But at the same time, through all that availability, we still have to be responsible. You know what? I need to step back a little bit and just sit there and do my work, right? And so I think it's impressive in seeing how technology has really facilitated these relationships, because I don't think I would be able to have a relationship with Maggie in Austin if I was still working out of a printer in the back of my car, right?
Just think about how far we've gone as a human species. Like, Chris, you're in DC, I'm in San Francisco Bay Area, and we're having an engaging conversation today that would have never happened if technology didn't evolve the way it did. And Maggie, like what you said earlier really resonates with me. And actually, I think it's incredibly hard for any business owner. It's incredibly hard because it is our job to set an example and lead by example. I personally also have a take where I don't ever expect anyone to work as hard as me. At the end of the day, it is my business. We're not the same. Yes, I'm going to lead by example, but we're also not the same. Accountability is a spectrum, and ours as business owners are much harder. I also have grown in recent years, and I have a deep desire for vocabulary, and I don't like the word balance, only because people tend to define balance as 50-50.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Good
don't,
point.
yeah, my life goal isn't to spend half of my week with my family and half my week with my work. My goal is to actually just be happy. And sometimes that means 90% work, 10% family, and sometimes that's 90% family and 10% work.
Mhm.
But the goal is not to strive for a 50-50. The goal is to strive for harmony and happiness.
Yeah.
That's just going to look very different on a week over week, month over month, sometimes year over year, depending on what kind of year you're having. Um, but it at least helps me ground myself in terms of how I have to look at my own time management and
Mhm.
also set clarity with my teams like, hey, I'm working a lot and there's no expectations for you to do some of the hours that I do because accountability is different. Um, but I'm also really, really happy at what I do, and that's okay. And that's the goal.
That's really well said. Yeah, it's not 50-50. It's how to be present and
Right.
grounded in what you're doing in that moment. And if you said, oh, I have to cut out at 4 because it's 50-50, then you might not be fully present when you're at home at the table at dinner. And vice versa. You might undercut yourself because you didn't do the family thing. So then you're thinking about that at work. So, how can you put things on your calendar, pace things, be available to create that capacity for awareness and presence in whatever you're doing in that moment?
Um,
I think it would go down to, if I have to answer, like Moses, how would you know where you need to put your time for that day? Like if I show up, and sometimes I do show up where I see my calendar is like, man, that calendar just doesn't make sense with what my world feels like right now, right? It
Yes.
happens. Exactly. Like my calendar's like, my world isn't there right now. Like, why am I doing that? Like, I have all these other things that I personally feel that I need. And that's the accountability part that I don't think that there is a trick or a rule that I can think of to help me make that decision, except for this. Who needs me more? And will I make an impact on that project to get it to the next step?
mm,
Right. And I think that just being able to prioritize at the end of the day, who can I have the most positive impact in one day? If I know Maggie needs something right now, and it might be something so small, but that small thing might make the world of a difference for Maggie on her project,
Mhm.
right? I have to make that investment. And I think that recognizing that we as principals, as engineers, and just responsible for projects, there is that element of no one can teach you to just be responsible with how you want to develop that relationship with that person or that project or that owner or whatever that is.
mm.
And I think that's at the end of the day when I'm gathering from this, and it's kind of like an enlightenment. Man, I just need to make sure that I always make sure I'm available at the right time to make sure that, if anything does come up, we want to preserve that building and that relationship.
Yeah, and being attuned to that. And maybe that's how you build a framework of process that's, this is our process. But
Yeah.
then within that, if you and your team and you and your team is an extension of you because you're showing how to be attuned, how to see these little micro clues of how to make these decisions strategically, that maybe that's how you develop a process that is a strict process with flexibility.
Maggie, do you have interactions with your team when you make a decision, do you talk with your team on how you made that decision or what parameters you considered you do? That's
Yes.
good. Yeah.
Yes. I think context and why is so powerful that it gives, for whatever it is, whether it's a design decision or a business decision, I will always try and be as transparent as what is appropriate. Because if I'm just telling somebody, I need you to do this thing, they have no idea why. They don't have any clues as to what's important.
Yeah.
But if they know why a decision was made, then there's more ownership and agency and buy-in.
Yeah. And I see that the confidence goes up because now they know something about the world more. The last thing that I've tried to really emphasize on my staff, and somebody brought it up earlier, is drawing on paper. I don't know how often I tell my staff, draw me a section or show me on paper what that looks like. And I think that when you go through that exercise of having to think through your drawing, you either realize that you don't know something, you realize that you actually know the answer. And what I've learned is that simple tool of just put it on paper and let's talk through it, right? And as they're sitting there drawing it, you almost stop talking and they almost draw the answer themselves because you just facilitated that little thought process and gave them that confidence that you know enough to now step back and just let them put that thought on paper. I think that's what I'm gathering from. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always think of like all the W's that are very common, and it always starts with the why. Like as leaders, I think if we don't articulate the why, we actually leave our team um, spiraling a bit because it's usually the context is really, really important. The why, the who, the when, the what, the how. And I think as an organization grows, some of those W's you might be able to not do anymore.
Yeah.
But the why is probably the only one that never goes away. The team needs to know why they do what they got to do with purpose. If not, like then everyone doesn't know why, and it's actually extraordinarily inefficient and unaligned.
I
I know
agree.
we're a little bit close on time. Chris, I'm gonna break a little bit of the rule and go a little bit over, if that's okay. And I'm just gonna go straight to like the last question, which is usually one of my favorites for everyone here. Which is what's the one way you used to work that you'll never go back to? Like the world is changing so fast. Like what I would love for you to like name something that you're not gonna go back to that.
Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah.
My God, I would spend, I don't know how many billable hours trying to get a function to work. I love Excel, but for what we do as engineers, I have like a gazillion Excel spreadsheets that I built when I was a young engineer that to this day, they still work. But it's finding these softwares that are just, I needed something that's built and already ready to talk to me. And I think because of my time, it's Excel. I just don't want to have to sit there and just build anything anymore.
Yeah. I think I have two. The first is when we switched to early phase pencil and trace instead of computer fully drawn plan and massing. I will never go back there because it made such a huge impact in the trust and cadence and decision making. The other thing would be adjusting how we operate internally as far as meetings and time management and respecting each other's time within the office. Where does it need to be a meeting? If it does, what's it about so that everybody can come prepared? How much time should it take? You schedule that time and you don't take any more. And one of my favorite things that I just say on repeat around here is be bright, be brief, be gone.
I'm going to write that down.
Be bright, be brief, be gone.
Well, in the spirit of that, thank you so much, Maggie and Moises. This is super fun. Thank you, Robert. Once again, another great episode with two folks who are running their own ship, and a lot of the time they're collaborating and their staff is collaborating.
Thanks for having us.